Hello, welcome back to Weave at Brooklands. Today I want to share some insights on sampling. And I whispered the word sampling because sampling is something that weavers tend to run away from. And it's a really bad thing if you do run away from it, because really and truly, much better to use a little bit of time and a little bit of yarn to make a sample than to use a lot of time and a lot of yarn to produce a project that isn't quite as wonderful as you'd hoped. Now, as you can see, I've got just a very short warp up on this loom. And I've woven a small sample. And I've got, this is a sock weight cotton, so approximately an 8x4 cotton, and I've got it in a 7.5 reed. Obviously, it's not going to work. If I beat it down hard, it gives me very much a weft dominant weave structure, not a weft faced weave structure, but a weft dominant weave structure. And if I aim for a balanced weave, I get this gappy, kind of really awful thing happening. And sometimes we might think that if we want to make a light shawl with lots of drape or something, that this would be the way to go. But in actual fact, as soon as I get my finger in there, I can make a huge hole in the structure, which means that my cloth has no integrity, so it's not going to work. So, what am I going to do about it? I'm going to put it in a different sized heddle, and I'm going to try then. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So some of you will remember that when I put this warp up, this warp is only 1 meter long. If I work out how many warp ends I have, on a 7.5 reed, I've got 30 warp ends per 10 centimeters, so over 30 centimeters, I've got 90 warp ends. 90 warp ends at 1 meter long means 90 meters of cotton. And if I look on the label of my yarn, let's just find it. In 50 grams, there are 156 meters. So I'm using maybe at the very most here, probably about 120 meters of yarn, not even a full 50-gram ball, to create a sample. And by creating a sample, I'm giving myself the assurance that when I start my project, things are going to work out as they should. So first of all, with my ultra short warp, I used the lashing on method to tie it on, so I minimized my warp waste. Now I'm going to show you how to change so that you can transfer the warp into a smaller sized reed. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to advance the warp. Give yourself lots of room to work. Then take the existing heddle out of the heddle block. Just let it stand there. I'm leaving the warp intact at this stage. Bring that forward. Here I have my 10 DPI reed. And I'm just going to pop that in there so that it's held in place. Yeah. So in order to change now from one reed size to another, I'm going to start working from the center of my reed. And I'm simply going to find my middle thread. Remember, the stop after the Ashford word in the middle of your reed marks the central thread. So I'm just finding that on this one. There it is there. And I'm going to snip right close to this cloth. This doesn't serve any purpose now. It's purely and simply is going to go in the bin. So I can snip lovely and close. I'm going to pull that thread out of the reed, and taking my threading hook, I'm going to bring it through the center of the new one. So it's a little bit awkward to do this, especially if you're not in the working position, because obviously I'm demonstrating, so I'm standing up. And now it's an easy thing to take one thread on either side and to just continue the process. That one comes out next, and it will come through the hole. Then I have the next one is the next yellow. Pull that one out. So it's a little bit painstaking to do this, but I promise you that it's worth it. If you're starting a knitting project or a crochet project, you would not start a new project without knitting a swatch. And a swatch tells you if your sizing is correct, if you're using the right size needle for your particular tension, to give you the sizes that correlate to what is stated in the pattern. Now, that's exactly what I'm doing here, except I'm doing it weaver-wise. I don't do this every time I start a new project. I do it when I'm using a yarn that I'm not familiar with or that I haven't used before. So, and of course, we all know by now that, in fact, what you should do when you're starting a project and you're looking at a yarn that's unfamiliar is you should do a yarn wrap, because that gives you a very good indication of which size reed you should use. But sometimes you do honestly need to do a little sample swatch. So I'm going to just carry on threading this as it is, and I'm going to get to the end, and then I'm going to talk to you some more about this. Okay, so there you can see I've got the first half done. We work from the center, because if we go from the center to one side and the center to the other side, or if we even start in the center and move out step by step by step, which we could also do, it means that we don't have to worry to recalculate and count the number of threads. So it automatically centers the warp again and gives us the new width in the new reed size. We have to put the heddle in the up position because it can't go anywhere else, because these remaining threads keep it out of the way. So we keep it in the up position. So it's a little bit wobbly for your first group of threads. And once you've done sort of, I don't know, 8 or 10 warp threads, it's a good idea to just tie them off, just in a loose little knot like that that we can undo easily, but it also helps to stabilize the heddle. Don't panic if you get a couple of crossed threads behind the heddle. It doesn't matter. This is not a masterpiece. It's a sample. It's an experiment. And just bear in mind as you go that the important thing about a sample is that it answers questions for us. It doesn't have to serve a purpose. If your sample answers your questions and serves a purpose, then you've actually got a total bonus as far as your sample is concerned. The question that I answered with my first little part of the sample was that my set for this particular yarn was way off. And as long as you can get this kind of an idea from it, yes, you can take your sampling a bit further, and you can say you want your sample to show you how much shrinkage you're going to get from that particular type of yarn, or is the color going to run, or all sorts of questions like that. But for a basic, am I on the right track kind of sample, then this is what I would do. So there we are. After a 10-minute threading operation, my loom is totally rethreaded in the new reed. It's centered in the reed. I've tied on again using the lashing on system, and I've made my sample. And I think that you will agree with me that that little sampling exercises was well worth it. There's a bit of a difference between that and that, and I'm happy with that. Now, there is still enough warp left on there for me to do two things. I'm happy with the sample, so I could weave up and make it square, which would give me about a 20 centimeter square. And that would give me enough of a sample for washing. And if I were going to take my sample off the loom and wash it to check for shrinkage, the only thing that I would do on either side would be to run a thin line of glue along the bottom and the top just to stabilize it, and that will hold in the washing machine, and you'll be able to see how much your sample shrunk. If, however, I wasn't happy with this sample and I wanted to try another reed size, because I've used this incredibly economic lashing on system, there is still enough of that tiny little warp left for me to rethread again, for example, into a 12.5 or a 15 DPI reed, and go through the whole process again. So please, my friends, don't be afraid of sampling. It doesn't use a tremendous amount of yarn. It doesn't take a tremendous amount of time, but it does save a tremendous amount of heartache. So, I'm Glynis. I'm from Weave at Brooklands. If this video helped you, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. You can also find me on Patreon, where I have a page called The Weaving Diaries, where I post continuously on all kinds of weaving stuff. And just keep an eye open, because there's a very exciting new course just around the corner. Until next week, I hope you have a good one.